In our conversations, Don Juan consistently referred to the phrase man of knowledge, but never explained what he meant by it. A man of knowledge is one who has followed truthfully the hardships of learning, he said. Can anyone be a man of knowledge? No, not anyone. Then what must a man do to become a man of knowledge? He must challenge and defeat his four natural enemies. A week later, as Carlos was getting ready to leave, he asked Don Juan again about the enemies of a man of knowledge. Don Juan hesitated for a while, but then began to talk. When a man starts to learn, he is never clear about his objectives. His purpose is faulty. His intent is vague. He hopes for rewards that will never materialize, for he knows nothing of the hardships of learning. He slowly begins to learn, bit by bit at first, then in big chunks, and his thoughts soon clash. What he learns is never what he imagined, and soon he begins to be afraid. Learning is never what one expects. Every step of learning is a new task, and the fear a man is experiencing begins to mount mercilessly. His purpose becomes a battlefield. And thus he has stumbled upon the first of his natural enemies, fear. A terrible enemy, treacherous and difficult to overcome, concealed at every turn, prowling, waiting. And if the man, terrified in its presence, runs away, his enemy will have put an end to his quest. What will happen to the man if he runs away in fear? Nothing happens to him except that he will never learn. He will never become a man of knowledge. He will perhaps be a bully or a harmless, scared man. At any rate, he will be a defeated man. His first enemy will put an end to his cravings. And what can he do to overcome fear? The answer is simple. He must defy his fear and take the next step in learning, and the next, and the next. He must be fully afraid, yet he must not stop. That is the rule, and a moment will come when his first enemy retreats. The man begins to feel sure of himself. His intent becomes stronger. Learning is no longer a terrifying task. When this joyful moment comes, the man can say without hesitation that he has defeated his first natural enemy. Does it happen at once, Don Juan, or little by little? It happens little by little, and yet the fear is vanquished suddenly and fast. But won't the man be afraid again if something new happens to him? No, once a man has vanquished fear, he is free from it for the rest of his life, because, instead of fear, he has acquired clarity, a clarity of mind which erases fear. By then a man knows his desires. He knows how to satisfy those desires. He can anticipate the new steps of learning, and a sharp clarity surrounds everything. The man feels that nothing is concealed, and thus he has encountered his second enemy. Clarity, that clarity of mind which is so hard to obtain, dispels fear, but also blinds. It forces the man never to doubt himself. It gives him the assurance he can do anything he pleases, for he sees clearly into everything, and he is courageous because he is clear, and he stops at nothing because he is clear. But all that is a mistake. It is like something incomplete. If the man yields to this make-believe power, he has succumbed to his second enemy and will fumble with learning. He will rush when he should be patient, or he will be patient when he should rush, and he will fumble with learning until he winds up incapable of learning anything more. What becomes of a man who is defeated in that way, Don Juan? His second enemy has just stopped him from trying to become a man of knowledge. Instead, the man may turn into a buoyant warrior or a clown, yet that clarity will never change to darkness and fear again. He will be clear as long as he lives, but he will no longer learn or yearn for anything. What does he have to do to avoid being defeated? He must do what he did with fear. He must defy his clarity and use it only to see, and wait patiently and measure carefully before taking new steps. He must think that his clarity is a mistake. A moment will come when he understands that clarity was only a point before his eyes, and thus he will have overcome his second enemy, and will arrive at a position where nothing can harm him any more. This will not be a mistake. It will not be only a point before his eyes. It will be true power. He will know at this point that the power he has been pursuing for so long is finally his. He can do with it whatever he pleases. His ally is at his command. His wish is the rule. He sees all that is around him. But he has also come across his third enemy, power. Power is the strongest of all enemies. The easiest thing to do is to give in. After all, the individual is truly invincible. He commands, starts taking calculated risks, and ends in making rules. A man at this stage hardly notices his third enemy closing in on him, and suddenly, without realizing, his enemy will have turned him into a cruel, capricious man. Will he lose his power? No, he will never lose his clarity or his power. What then will distinguish him from a man of knowledge? A man who is defeated by power dies without really knowing how to handle it. Power is only a burden on his fate. Such a man has no command over himself, and cannot tell how or when to use his power. Is the defeat by any of these enemies a final defeat? Of course it is final. Once one of these enemies overpowers a man, there is nothing he can do. Is it possible, for instance, that the man who is defeated by power may see his error and mend his ways? No, once a man gives in, he's through. But what if he's temporarily blinded by power and then refuses it? That means his battle is still on. That means he is still trying to become a man of knowledge. A man is only defeated when he abandons himself. But then, Don Juan, it is possible that a man may abandon himself to fear for years, but finally conquer it. No, that's not true. If he gives in to fear, he will never conquer it, because he will shy away from learning and never try again. But if he tries to learn for years in the midst of fear, he will eventually conquer it, because he will never really have abandoned himself to it. How can he defeat his third enemy, Don Juan? He has to defy it deliberately. He has to realize the power he has seemingly acquired is never really his. He must keep himself in line at all times. If he can see that clarity and power without self-control are worse than mistakes, he will reach a point where everything is held in check. He will know then when and how to use his power, and thus he will have defeated his third enemy. The man will be, by then, at the end of his journey of learning, and almost without warning, he will come upon his last enemy, old age. This is the cruelest enemy, one he won't be able to defeat, but only fight away. This is the time when a man has no fears, no impatient clarity, and all his power is in check. But he will also have an unyielding desire to rest. If he gives in to his desire to soothe himself in tiredness, he will have lost his last round, and his enemy will cut him down into a feeble old man. But if the man sloughs off his tiredness and lives his fate through, then he can be called a man of knowledge, if only for the brief moment when he succeeds in fighting off his last invincible enemy. That moment of clarity, power, and knowledge is enough. In the final analysis, a man goes to knowledge as he goes to war, wide awake with fear, respect, and absolute assurance. Going to knowledge in any other way is a mistake, and whoever makes it will regret it.